just in terms of Tom Homan's comments and how they're being interpreted, this idea that there are standards of conduct, and if federal agents don't abide by those standards, that they will be dealt with. Also, this idea that the operations there are going to be centered around targeted enforcement and that they do plan some kind of drawdown. How are Homan's comments being received by protesters, by community activists, groups on the ground in Minneapolis?
Zain, no one's going to throw Tom Homan a parade for vocalizing the literal bare minimum of what you would expect from the federal government in a law enforcement operation. But there is a bit of a sigh of relief and hopefulness, and it is exceedingly rare for the Trump administration to admit that something didn't go perfectly. So I do think there's something validating about Tom Homan saying today that there wasn't a perfect operation, that he was brought in there to fix the things that have gone wrong. So I do think there's some hope there.
But what about the level of distrust, the level of animosity on the street? I mean, it's one thing to have a man from the administration in a suit deliver a news conference in front of reporters, but on the ground in Minneapolis, when people are protesting, they don't want ICE or CBP in their city. They don't believe that they should be conducting some of these operations. There is so much distrust. How is that going to change?
It's all about actions, right? I mean, I do think the fact that we've both been listening live to President Trump and his cabinet meeting today, and the fact that he didn't say anything, I think is a positive development. Let the border czar's words sit, and then let's see what happens. The drawdown, he has said, is in progress. We'll see. I will tell you that while much of the activists have been focused on the city of Minneapolis, and much of the world has been focused on Minneapolis, here in this Twin Cities area, ICE agents have been all in the surrounding communities. So it's, we'll believe it when we see it, right? Last night, there were a ton of ICE agents out in a suburb where I live, Maple Grove. And so let's see it. If there's a drawdown, let's see it. If there's going to be a change, I think the real hopeful thing was the fact that, you know, if there's going to be a return to the original plan, targeted enforcement of the supposed worst of the worst, that would be a massive change to what we've been seeing in our streets and our neighborhoods every day.
As you know, initially we were told by the administration that Alex Pretty was brandishing a gun. And then, of course, we all watched the video, and we watched multiple videos from several different angles that showed something very, very different. And we watched him be killed or essentially fired upon at least 10 times. And we watched him literally die on video. And so just in terms of what would normally happen when there was a situation involving federal agents and a level of perceived injustice, there would be accountability. The fact that we still do not know the name of the agent who actually fired those shots, very different already from what we saw with Renee Good, when almost immediately we all found out that it was Jonathan Ross who fired the shot that killed Renee Good. Right. This time we have no idea. How is that being perceived on the streets of Minneapolis? And just the fact that I imagine that there is some concern that there's not going to be any accountability, perhaps.
There is zero trust between people on the streets in the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul and the federal government right now. So this just adds to that. You know, some transparency would go a long way. Tell us who these agents are. At first, besides all of the lies that you just talked about, you know, they told us that these agents were still on the job. And now yesterday, we're told, no, they were suspended. Well, what is it? It is, I think, the number one thing that, you know, certainly there are some Trump supporters who want chaos, perhaps, or want this sort of response. And there are others who just don't believe there should be any enforcement of the immigration laws. I think most people believe in enforcing immigration laws, but most people believe in a professional law enforcement. We had a federal judge here in Minneapolis say that ICE has violated more than 100 federal court orders, more than some governmental agencies have enforced in their entire existence, have been ignored over the last couple of weeks. So professionalism, transparency, and action. I think that's what people want.
All right, Jason DeRusha in Minneapolis for us. Thank you so much. Appreciate your perspective.